My main point about these modes, right, was that for a long time I thought the hard-boiled novelist kind of won. The neuromancers won. This was the way that crime fiction should be done. It should be hard-boiled, it should be noir, it should be gritty, it should be realistic. And one day I woke up and realized actually no. The fiction I won is the Agatha Christie school. Every other TV show you turn on is an Agatha Christie Golden Age murder mystery. It's the cozies that have made a huge comeback, and everyone is actually after, the gentle mystery where no one cares who the corpse is as long as there's a corpse. And in fact, what I discovered that as much as I was on the side of the hard-boiled novelist for a long time, I actually absolutely love Agatha Christie and I love Golden Age mysteries. And I discovered that partly through accidentally writing them. So that's how I had to learn. I had to do some very heavy lifting to learn how these things work. Now, Asimov was the guy who really brought detective fiction into science fiction, in fact, into science fiction. And he did it partly by he set up these three laws of robotics. This is kind of his early start with this. A robot may not injure a human being, etc., etc. And the point about them was they didn't actually work, as he knew perfectly well. They created ambiguity and paradox, and they allowed for puzzles. And that's the only reason of the three laws of robotics, which drives me insane because I did a conference on AI a few years ago with a bunch of actual AI scientists and a bunch of science fiction writers. And all the AI scientists were quoting the three laws of robotics. And we were all going, but they were never meant to work. They were just a literary device to create stories, right? So the detective, in a way, in Asimov has to figure out why the robot has acted the way it has. Where did the laws go wrong? But I'll get back to my little vampire mysteries and how I discovered that I love the Golden Age. So I thought as a joke, I will do this sort of Asimovian mystery. Uh, how do I do that? How do you write a vampire mystery, right? I've no idea. I've never had to plot a proper mystery before. And so I came up with some ridiculous rules. Okay, let me just show you this before I go into the next one. So the way hard-boiled stories work, and this is a formula again. Remember, these are formula stories. So if you're ever scared of, well, how am I going to write this book, or they're formulas, just stick to the formula. Detective takes on the case. Right? Once a detective takes on the case, they have to go looking for information. So they go to location A, interview informant A, go to location B, interview. The whole plot involves you having to go places and talk to people, which is fantastic for exploring a fantasy or science fiction world as well. And at some point, you get kidnapped, threatened, beaten off, warned off the case, right? And you can repeat that over and over, collecting clues, maybe go down blind alleys. And finally, you get to a realization, confront the real villain, and the aftermath. So this is kind of the simple structure for a hard-boiled story. A noir story is different because in noir, there are no good people. Noir is basically about bad people trying to get away with whatever it is they did, and things don't work well for them either. Oh yeah, no, these are the okay. I made up these fake vampire laws to parody Asimov. I said a vampire may not reveal the existence of other vampires, may not create an excessive amount of offspring, and may not kill another vampire without, really wanting to anyway. So it makes no sense. Basically, vampires just murdering vampires, right? Um, But the structure of the Golden Age murder mystery, which is presented to you here in a very, very simple form, is you have a very limited number of characters in one of those stories, okay? You start with your victim. You have a victim and you have a murderer, right? You have your detective. Maybe the detective has a sidekick, maybe not, but often have a sidekick. And then you have the suspects. Now, remember, the murder is one of the suspects. So you can't have too many suspects in this kind of story. You need to have three, four, five suspects. One of whom is the murderer. And they all have to have a reason to have wanted to kill the victim. Right? That's the most important thing. So if you want to write a golden age story, and this is kind of what I did with the Judge D stories to begin with, is I worked them all out in advance before I ever wrote them. I was like, well, who is the victim? Who is the murderer? Who are the other suspects? Why did they want to kill him? Right? What are their motives? Right? And then we have the method of the killing, the location as well, the setting. Right? And then the other thing we have that we have to play fair, remember, is the clues. We have to plant clues into the story. So the reader can theoretically solve the case before the detective does. So it's a lot of kind of heavy lifting before you start writing, basically. But very easy to write once you figured it all out. Now, the thing I discovered after writing a few of these and sort of getting a bit more comfortable with them is that actually most of it doesn't make any sense whatsoever because the actual mystery is so slight. And what I discovered is that most of the time you're going to put a little clue in, and then very quickly you're going to go wave your hand in the air and say, don't look over there, don't look over there. And we're going to go off on a wild goose chase to the other side of town just so I can distract you from this very obvious clue that I just put in. And that's part of the fun of the story because we want to be bamboozled. We want to be taken off somewhere else. And we like the interaction of these characters. We know that it doesn't matter who died, really. No one cares about the death, especially not if they're vampires. But this applies to any golden age story, you know. And again, you can transpose this into a fantasy world. You can transpose it into a science fiction world. I actually recently did, I thought, oh, you know, it would be fun to do this, but as a science fiction story instead of a vampire story. So the next story I have for Reactor is a sort of robot detective solving this sort of thing again. So it's kind of a different, you know, a different take on the same idea. And I thought that might be fun. It turned out it wasn't as funny. I think vampires are a lot funnier than robots. There's something a little bit sad about robots. But if you just take this diagram and if you take nothing else from this, take this diagram and just try and work, you know, a golden age mystery for yourselves and you can't fail.